Campsite 12 was empty, coffee still warm, tent zipped from the outside. And then we found the photographs. Park rangers don't talk about what they find at abandoned campsites. Not to the media, not to the families, sometimes not even to each other. Because when someone vanishes from a campsite, when their gear is left behind, their food untouched, their belongings arranged in ways that make no sense, the official report always says the same thing: presumed lost, search discontinued. But the rangers know better. They've seen the tents zipped shut with people still missing, the fires left burning with no one tending them, the cameras full of photos that should never have been taken. Tonight, you're going to hear about 4 campsites, 4 incidents that were never fully explained. 4 times rangers arrived expecting routine and left with questions they're still afraid to answer. These are true incidents, filed reports, documented evidence. And after you hear them, you'll understand why some rangers refuse certain patrol assignments, because what they find at abandoned campsites stays with them forever. Incident 1. The Spiral Campsite. Location: Olympic National Park, Washington. Date: August 2016. Ranger: Jessica Ruiz. Jessica Ruiz had been a backcountry ranger for 6 years when she received the call about Campsite 9 in the Hoh Rainforest. A day hiker had reported seeing an abandoned camp with strange activity, and dispatch needed someone to check it out. Strange activity. That could mean anything. Wildlife getting into food, maybe a bear tearing through gear. Jessica grabbed her pack and headed out. The Hoh Show is one of the wettest places in the continental U.S., a temperate rainforest thick with moss, ferns, and trees so old they'd been standing when the first Europeans arrived. The trail to Campsite 9 was well maintained but isolated, nearly 5 miles from the trailhead. Jessica reached the site just before noon. At first glance, it looked occupied. A tent stood fully erected, the rainfly taut and properly staked. A backpack leaned against a tree. Camping chairs sat around a cold fire ring. But no one answered when she called out. "Hello, park ranger? Anyone here?" Silence. Just the drip of water from moss-covered branches and the distant rush of the Hoh River. Jessica approached cautiously. The tent was a 2-person model, dark green, expensive. The zipper was closed. Not just closed, but sealed from the outside with a carabiner clipped through the zipper pulls. Whoever had been here had locked themselves out of their own tent, or something had locked them out. She unclipped the carabiner and opened the tent. Inside, 2 sleeping bags neatly rolled, a lantern, a paperback book folded open, pages down like someone had just set it aside. Personal items: phone charger, toiletries, a pair of hiking boots, no signs of struggle, no blood, no torn fabric, just absence. Jessica backed out of the tent and surveyed the rest of the campsite. That's when she noticed the pattern. The camping chairs had been moved, all 4 of them, arranged in a perfect circle around the fire ring. Not the casual arrangement of people sitting around a fire. These were precise, evenly spaced, facing inward. And in the center of the fire ring, someone had built a cairn, not a casual stack of rocks. A deliberate structure, dozens of stones, balanced carefully, spiraling upward nearly 2 feet high. The kind of thing that takes time. Focus, intent. Jessica's skin prickled. She circled the campsite, looking for footprints, drag marks, anything that might explain what happened. The ground was soft from recent rain, and she found tracks easily. 2 sets. Boot prints, both adult-sized, leading from the tent to the fire ring. Then, nothing. The tracks simply stopped at the edge of the clearing, as if the people had walked to that spot and vanished mid-step. Jessica keyed her radio. "Ruiz to dispatch. I'm at Campsite 9. I need you to send someone out here. I've got an abandoned camp, no occupants, and some things that don't add up." "Copy. What's the situation?" Jessica hesitated, staring at the spiral cairn. "I'm not sure yet, but I think we need search and rescue." The search began that afternoon. Teams combed the area for 2 days, expanding the radius mile by mile. They found nothing. No bodies. No additional tracks. No signs of anyone leaving the area. The tent, the gear, the cairn, all of it was photographed, cataloged, and removed. The permit on file showed a couple from Seattle had reserved the site for 3 nights. When rangers contacted their emergency contact, the family confirmed they'd been reported missing. They were never found. Jessica returned to Campsite 9 one more time, weeks later, after the search had been called off. The fire ring had been cleared, the area cleaned, but when she walked to the spot where the cairn had stood, she found something the cleanup crew had missed. A single stone, balanced upright in the center of the ring. She didn't touch it, didn't move it, she just turned around and hiked back out. Jessica Ruiz requested a transfer 6 months later. She never worked in the Hoh Rainforest again. Incident 2, the camera. Location, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee. Date, October 2017. Ranger, David Chen. David Chen had been responding to abandoned campsites for over a decade. Most were straightforward. Hikers who left early, forgot gear, or got spooked by wildlife. You'd catalog the items, hold them for 30 days, and if no one claimed them, they'd go to Lost and Found. But Campsite 34 was different. The report came in from a trail crew working near Cades Cove. They'd spotted a tent that had been up for at least a week, untouched, with no sign of occupants. When campsites go unattended that long, it usually means something's wrong. David hiked in with another ranger, Mark, just after sunrise. The site sat in a small clearing ringed by oaks, about 2 miles off the main trail. The tent was a cheap dome model, blue nylon, sagging slightly from accumulated rain. "Looks empty," Mark said. David nodded. "Let's check it out." The tent wasn't just empty. It was staged. Inside, a sleeping bag lay perfectly flat, as if someone had smoothed it out before leaving. A small camp stove sat in the corner, clean, unused. And on top of the sleeping bag, centered precisely, was a digital camera. David picked it up carefully, turning it over. It was an older model, the kind with a small screen on the back. The battery indicator showed half charge. "Think it still works?" Mark asked. David pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. There were 147 photos on the memory card. David scrolled through them, Mark looking over his shoulder. The first 50 photos were normal. Scenic shots, mountain views, wildflowers, sunrise over the ridgeline. The photographer had been hiking for days, documenting the journey. Then the photos changed. Photo 51. The tent, photographed from outside at night. The flash illuminated the blue fabric, but the forest beyond was pitch black. Photo 52. The same shot, but closer, as if the photographer had taken a step forward. Photo 53. Closer still. David kept scrolling. Photos 54 through 80 were all of the tent, each one taken from a slightly different angle, circling the campsite. Closer and closer with each shot. Photo 81. The tent's entrance, unzipped, the interior dark. Photo 82. Inside the tent, the sleeping bag, the stove, the empty space. Photo 83. A close-up of the sleeping bag. Photo 84. The camera, lying on the sleeping bag. David stopped scrolling. "Wait, the camera took a picture of itself?" Mark frowned. "Someone else must have been there, took the shot, then left the camera." But David was already scrolling forward. Photos 85 through 147 were all identical. The same image repeated 63 times. A close-up of the tent's roof from inside, as if the camera had been lying flat on the sleeping bag, pointing upward. Each photo was time-stamped, 1 minute apart, for over an hour. Automatic timer? Maybe. But why? David turned the camera off and bagged it as evidence. They searched the rest of the campsite but found nothing else. No permit, no ID, no other gear. Back at the ranger station, David uploaded the photos to his computer and examined them more closely. That's when he noticed something in the later shots, the ones of the tent roof. In photo 89, there was a shadow, faint, barely visible, but there. By photo 100, the The shadow was clearer. A shape, pressed against the outside of the tent, as if something was leaning against the fabric. By photo 130, the shape had moved. It was directly above the camera now, the fabric of the tent sagging slightly under its weight. David zoomed in. The shape wasn't random. It had definition. Contours. It looked like a hand. A very large hand, splayed against the roof of the tent, fingers spread wide. David sent the photos to the park's wildlife biologists, asking if they could identify what kind of animal might leave that impression. The response came back 3 days later, unable to determine. Recommend forwarding to law enforcement. The tent, the camera, and the photos were turned over to the National Park Service's Investigative Services Branch. David never heard what they concluded, but sometimes, late at night when he's reviewing photos from trail cams, he thinks about that hand pressed against the tent. And he wonders if the person who owned that camera is still out there, somewhere in the Smokies, watching the tents. Incident 3. The warm coffee. Location: Yosemite National Park, California. Date: June 2019. Ranger: Michael Torres. Michael Torres had drawn the early morning patrol, a routine sweep through the backcountry campsites near Tuolumne Meadows. It was peak season, and the campsites were usually full, which meant dealing with permit issues, bear sightings, and the occasional medical emergency. Campsite 12 was supposed to be occupied. A solo hiker, male, had filed a permit for 3 nights, but when Michael arrived at 7 a.m., something felt off. The campsite looked lived in. A tent stood fully erected. A backpack hung from a bear cable. A camp chair sat next to a small table made from a flat rock, and on that rock, steam rose from a metal camping mug. Michael stopped at the edge of the clearing. "Hello?" he called out. "Park ranger, just checking in." No response. He approached the tent slowly, scanning the area. No one visible. No sounds of movement. The tent zipper was open, not just unzipped, but wide open. The flaps spread apart as if someone had rushed out in a hurry. Michael crouched next to the coffee mug. He held his hand over it. Warm. Very warm. Freshly poured. He stood and called out again, louder this time. "This is Ranger Torres with the National Park Service. If you're nearby, please respond." Silence. Michael stepped closer to the tent and peered inside. Sleeping bag, clothing, a headlamp, all neatly arranged. No signs of distress. He backed away and circled the campsite, looking for tracks. The ground was hard-packed granite and dirt, not ideal for prints, but he found a few partial impressions near the tent. Boot treads, size 10 or 11, leading away from the campsite toward the tree line. Michael followed them for about 50 feet. Then they vanished, not gradually, not fading into harder ground. They just stopped, as if the person had taken 3 steps and then ceased to exist. He returned to the campsite and checked the coffee again. Still warm, Michael keyed his radio. "Torres to dispatch. I've got an occupied campsite with no occupant present. Fresh coffee. Tent open, but no signs of the permit holder. Requesting backup for a search." "Copy that. What's your 20? "Campsite 12, Tuolumne." A pause. "Campsite 12? That's been flagged before." Michael frowned. "Flagged for what?" "Hang on, pulling the file." Okay, yeah. 3 incidents in the last 8 years. All abandoned campsites. No occupants ever located." Michael looked around the clearing, his unease growing. "And we're still issuing permits for it. It's marked as routine patrol recommended. But yeah, it's open." Michael spent the next hour documenting everything. He photographed the tent, the coffee, the tracks. He checked the permit records on his tablet. The hiker, a 34-year-old man from Oregon, had checked in at the ranger station 2 days earlier. No next of kin listed. Search and rescue arrived by midday. They expanded the search radius, called in helicopters, combed the surrounding trails and ridgelines. Nothing The man was never found. But here's the detail that still haunts Michael. When the evidence team bagged the coffee mug to take back to the station, they noticed something etched into the bottom, scratched into the metal as if done with a knife or rock, were words, "Don't come back." The handwriting didn't match the permit holder's signature. And based on the oxidation of the scratches, the message had been carved at least a year before the man ever used the mug. Michael Torres still patrols Tuolumne Meadows, but he doesn't go to Campsite 12 anymore. Not since the day he returned to close the site and found a fresh mug of coffee sitting on the rock, still warm, with no one around for miles. Incident 4, the arranged site. Location: Boundary Waters, Minnesota. Date: September 2020. Ranger: Ann Bergstrom. Ann Bergstrom had been patrolling the Boundary Waters canoe area for 15 years. The BWCA is a wilderness of lakes, islands, and forests, where roads don't exist, and the only way in is by canoe. It's remote, quiet. The kind of place people go to disappear, intentionally. In September 2020, Anne received a call from a group of paddlers who'd come across an abandoned campsite on a small island in the middle of Knife Lake. They described it as, quote, disturbing, which was unusual. Paddlers in the Boundary Waters were used to solitude, used to the unexpected. Anne loaded her canoe and paddled out the next morning. Knife Lake is deep, cold, and surrounded by cliffs and pines. The island where the campsite sat was barely an acre, just a rocky outcrop with a few trees and a designated fire ring. As Anne approached, she saw the tent first. A solo setup, orange, positioned near the fire ring. But the way it was positioned, something felt wrong. She beached her canoe and climbed onto the island. The campsite wasn't abandoned, it was arranged. The tent stood perfectly centered in the clearing. The stakes were driven in at exact intervals, the lines pulled taut and symmetrical. The fire ring held a stack of logs, not a casual pile, but a structure, each log placed perpendicular to the one below, forming a perfect square tower. And around the tent, in a wide circle, someone had placed stones, not a random scatter. Each stone was evenly spaced, forming a perfect ring. Anne's breath caught. She called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" The wind whispered through the pines. Water lapped at the rocks. No one answered. She approached the tent and unzipped it. Inside, a sleeping bag, folded into a perfect square. A lantern, dead center. A journal, placed on top of the sleeping bag, open to a blank page. No other gear, no food, no clothing. Anne picked up the journal carefully. The pages before the blank one were filled with handwriting. Tight, cramped, obsessive. She flipped to the first entry. Day 1. Finally alone. This is what I needed. Day 2. The silence is perfect. No voices, no people, just me and the water. Day 3. I heard something last night. Probably a loon. Or maybe a beaver. Hard to tell. Day 4. It's back. Whatever it is, I can hear it circling the island after dark. Day 5. I saw it, just for a second. Standing on the opposite shore. Watching. Day 6. It's not an animal. I don't know what it is, but it's not an animal. Day 7. I tried to leave this morning. My canoe is gone. I didn't move it. I tied it up. It was here yesterday. Day 8. The stones. I didn't put them there. I woke up and they were around the tent. A perfect circle. I counted them. 33 stones. I didn't put them there. Day 9. It came to the tent last night. I heard breathing. Right outside. I didn't look. I didn't move. I just waited until morning. Day 10. I understand now. The stones are a message. It's telling me to stay inside the circle. If I stay inside, I'm safe. Day 11. I'm staying inside the circle. Day 12. The rest of the pages were blank. Anne closed the journal, her hands shaking. She backed out of the tent and looked around the island. No canoe, no paddle, no way off the island except by swimming, and Knife Lake was cold enough to kill in minutes. She radioed for backup. Search teams scoured the lake for days, checking every island, every shoreline, every possible route the camper could have taken. They never found him, but they did find his canoe. It was on the opposite shore of the lake, 15 miles away, pulled up onto a beach and overturned. No paddle, no life jacket, and carved into the hull deep gouges that cut through the fiberglass. "Stay in the circle!" Anne Bergstrom still patrols the boundary waters, but she avoids Knife Lake. Because 6 months after the incident, a different group of paddlers reported seeing a tent on that same island. Orange, perfectly centered, surrounded by stones. And when rangers paddled out to investigate, the tent was gone. The stones remained. 4 campsites, 4 disappearances. 4 times rangers found evidence that should never have existed. Spiral cairns built with impossible precision. Cameras photographing themselves. Coffee left warm with no one around. Journals describing circles of stones that appeared overnight. These aren't folklore. These are filed incident reports. Documented searches. Evidence logged into Park Service databases. And here's what the official records won't tell you. None of these campsites were closed after the incidents. They're still open, still issuing permits, still waiting for the next person to set up a tent and disappear into the silence. Because shutting down a campsite raises questions. Questions the Park Service doesn't want to answer. So they file the reports. They conduct the searches. They catalog the evidence. And then they move on. But the rangers don't forget. They remember the spiral cairns, the cameras, the coffee, the stones. And when they patrol past those campsites late at night, sometimes they see lights, sometimes they hear sounds, sometimes they find fresh tracks leading to a tent that shouldn't be there. And they keep walking. Because some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some campsites aren't meant to be explained. They're just meant to be avoided. If you're planning a backcountry trip this year, do yourself a favor. Check the permit history of your campsite. Ask the rangers if there's been unusual activity. And if you wake up one morning to find stones arranged around your tent, break camp immediately. Don't ask why they're there. Just leave.